Now the reminders are Baal Peor. The second reminder is the benefits, and then within those he lists the benefits. The third reminder is their time before God in Horeb, which was another event from the past. They had stood before God, and that's where you and I will pick it up in verse 10 at that account. Now, just as a reminder, I'm reminding you that Moses was reminding them, because Moses knows that he's not going with them into the promised land. And they're going with Joshua, and he's got to remind them, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And don't do these things. So he says, remember what happened before God in Horeb. Verse 10, especially concerning the day you stood before the Lord your God in Horeb, when the Lord said to me, gather the people to me, and I will let them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, and that they may teach their children. So there were two reasons why God wanted the people gathered to himself at this place called Horeb at the mountain. We'll read a description of the mountain in just a minute, what the scene looked like. But two things that God desired to do. He desired to show his people, or to lead them to a place where they had a fear of him. Now, what does that mean? Did God want the people to be scared of him and to live in fear? No. They had lived in fear under Egyptian rule when they were slaves in Egypt. Other kings, other rulers, even, it happens, even today, governments can go south or sour when the leader of that government wants to be feared by the people. What we should want is respect, not fear. We don't want people to live in fear of us. Respect, sure. But what he's saying here when he says that he wanted to teach his people to fear him, what he means is that healthy, godly fear or respect. He wanted them to have a healthy respect of him, not to live in fear of him. Now, obviously, there is some fear that's mixed in there as we realize that, well, and at the end of our time today, we'll read these words, God is a consuming fire. That doesn't sound comforting. Okay, and it's meant to be that way. And so we do understand that if God wanted to, he could, just to bless your morning, suck the oxygen out of your body right now, and you'd be gone. He doesn't do that. Now, we understand that he could, and so there's that little bit of fear, like, oh man, he could do that. But he doesn't do it. And he allows us to continue on. And so because of that, we have a godly fear or a healthy respect of him. So that's the first thing that he wanted when he gathered them before him at Horeb. But here's the second thing in verse 10, and that they may teach their children. Now that's a big deal. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth when we get down to verse 14, because Moses will come back to revisit that. But that's the second thing, is he wanted the people to teach their children. So learn from God and then teach their children. Okay, now that's a big deal. Now, there are only four of us in here that have kids of our own. So the rest of you do not. However, very shortly, very quickly, you will have kids. Before you know it, you'll have a bunch of kids screaming like that. You, one of these days, very, very shortly, will find yourself in a home or driving a minivan. And you'll look in the rearview mirror and just be like, I'm driving a minivan with kids in it. It's happened to me. I've done it. I don't have a minivan anymore. I've been delivered. But I used to, nothing wrong with minivans. They're fine. But I just don't need it anymore. But I used to have a minivan with little kids. And it would occasionally happen. I'd be driving. And then it'd like, all of a sudden, look up. It's like, there are kids in the minivan. And then I do one of these. I'm married. And I have kids. It's like, how did this happen? You know? And it just happens so quick. And one of these days, you're going to have kids of your own. And you're going to be looking in the rearview mirror. Or you're going to be sitting in the house, and just, a hot mess and kids screaming like they were out there right now. And it's going to be like, what happened? How did I get here? It happens so quick. It's terrifying. But you'll have the responsibility of teaching God, the things of God, the Word of God, to your kids. That's a major goal for a Christian parent, is to teach their kids about God. Okay? And so Moses is introducing that, or reminding them of that. Now we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Let's get to verse 11. He's reminding them, okay, remember when we were before God in Horeb? He says in verse 11, in verse 10, God's calling you. Verse 11, then you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain. And the mountain burned with fire to the midst of heaven. In other words, the fire went all the way up into the sky with darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. I mean, that sounds terrifying to me. It sounds to me to be awe-inspiring, but it also sounds terrifying. We're here we are at this mountain. God, Moses called us all. Hey, God wants to talk to you guys. And you get to the foot of the mountain, and there's this fire going all the way up to the sky, which is terrifying enough. And but also we're told there, notice the description. These are things that we normally just read through very quickly. The mountain burned with fire to the midst of heaven, with darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. There was darkness there. We all know what darkness is, right? Turn off the lights at night to go to sleep, and there's darkness. Okay? You try not to leave you go to sleep at night, you try not to leave the closet door open, right? Because, man, you look in there, and it's just like pitch black, and you don't know what's in there, right? Darkness. Then there's thick darkness. The thick darkness might be more of what we see in the closet. It's like in your room is dark, but you might have a window or maybe a little night light on or something. And, there's darkness in there, but then you look in there and it's like there's thick darkness, like what's in there. But there was a darkness. By saying that it was a thick darkness, it was something that they could feel. It was a thick darkness, a cloud. And then it says in verse 12, and the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. So God spoke from the fire. As if this scene wasn't terrible enough, the fire going up, the mountains burning with a fire all the way up to the sky. There's darkness, there's clouds, there's thick darkness. Then all of a sudden a voice comes forth. In verse 12, and the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but saw no form. You only heard a voice. So in verse 13, he declared to you his covenant, that's his agreement, which he commanded you to perform. The 10 Commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And then in verse 14, and the Lord commanded me, Moses says, at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, okay? The rules, the law, the regulations, what they were to do, not do. What was right, what was wrong. Why did he teach them that? That you might observe them in the land which you cross over to possess. Now Moses makes mention of the land that they were going over to possess. God had given them a specific plot of land over on that side of the river over there. And Moses is on this side with all the people. He's in the process of handing the people off to Joshua, and Joshua is going to lead them across the river. Moses has to stay there, and he's actually going to die. And he knows that he is. God already told him that he would. And so Moses is saying, listen, don't forget these things. Remember these things. As you go over, remember these things. Don't forget them. Now, one of the major things that he does in here, he said it in verse 10, and then he gave us the example in verse 14, and that is the biblical principle of the older teaching the younger. Now, I say it's a biblical principle because it's something that we as biblical people, Christians, we need to be doing. It also is something that happens naturally. You learn how to do the things that you do from older people. You may not like to admit it, but it happens all of the time. It probably, older people probably affect the way you view things. They probably affect the things that you view. Older people probably have had some kind of effect on the YouTube videos that you watch, probably on the clothes that you and I wear. You're looking at me like, yeah, older guy definitely had an effect on you, right? But we tend to have, it generally happens, naturally happens that older people influence the things that we do. That's a general principle, but biblically speaking, we have a responsibility to do that. Now look at verse 10 once again, and that they may teach their children. Now again, you do not have any children, but it'll happen very quickly. You'll have kids. And you will have the responsibility of teaching those kids lots of different things. Listen, you learned how to tie your shoes, probably from a parent, somebody older than you. Okay? You learned how to brush your teeth and floss and rinse and whatever else from somebody older than you. You didn't just learn that on your own. You learned how to properly go to the bathroom. And we are so thankful to your parents for that. Okay? Some of you learned how to put on deodorant. Others are still in the process. We learn how to do all of those basic things from older people. Generally speaking, from our parents. Not always from our parents, but from older people. We then have the responsibility of teaching those things to younger people. Now this is where a breakdown happens often. What happens is when you're real young, some of you were super helpful. You would see your mom making something or cleaning something, or dad working on something or fixing something or whatever, and you wanted to go and help them. Like, hey, what can I do? How can I help you? You see your dad up on the roof and he's got a drill or a hammer or something, and you're a little kid and you just wanted to get up there. Dad, please, Dad, can I come up? I remember being up on my roof and having to fix things, and my kids down below, like, Dad, can I please come up? Now they were asking while they were at the top of the ladder already, and I'm on the roof working, and then I hear Dad. And it's like, oh, what was that? And one of my kids at the top of the ladder already. Is it okay to come up? You're already up. Get up here. Let's go. It's like, be safer for you to come up here with me than up and down that ladder. But you would see your parents, and maybe you just wanted to like be all about it. And what can I do? And Dad's got his work gloves on. I'm gonna go get my work gloves. I'll be back. Or Mom's doing this, and I'm gonna go. I'll be right back. And maybe Mom had an apron. I'm sharing things with you that I saw in my own family. Like maybe Mom's got an apron on, and then but you got your little apron, maybe that Grandma gave you or something. You run and get your apron, and then you put your apron on. You come in like, Mom, I'm ready to help, and she's like, oh, yeah, all right, like, okay, all right, fine. Here's what we'll do or whatever. But you were, that mindset of being so helpful. But then for many of us, something happens when we're young and we start to get into those in-between years between being young and being an adult, a full-fledged old adult. Something happens is we turn our attention inward oftentimes, and we begin to forget about other people. Say, I don't have time for that. Especially, most often, younger siblings. It's like younger brother, younger sister. Oh my goodness, Lord, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why did you forsake me? Like, why would you do this to me, God, and give me a little brother or a little sister? I was in the middle of gaming, I was about to save the world, me and my crew, and you got your little headset on and you're gaming, like, oh, talking to your friend, okay, get my back, man, okay, cover me, and then, little brother, little sister comes by, and they, knock the console over, or they, turn your computer off or something, and you just, you go ballistic, I can't believe it, I was right in the middle of saving the world, and I can't believe you messed it up, or little brother or little sister come through, and you're trying to FaceTime with your posse or whatever, and then they come through and mess it up. Why'd you, Mom, tell her to get out of here, tell him to get out of here. Oh, you're always bugging me, and you just feel like, get out of here. You're such a pest. And so that can oftentimes happen in those in-between years when our attention turns inward. It used to be outward. We're looking for people that we can help, and Mom and whoever else, or the neighbor or whatever. But oftentimes that attention, not for everybody, but for most of us, the attention goes inward. And then what happens is we forget other people, but in the process, we also forget those that are younger than us. But biblically speaking, now, it says it here, but you go on into the New Testament, same thing. Paul talked about it to Timothy and Titus. Peter talked about it. It's a responsibility that we have for the older to teach the younger. But I've seen the breakdown even in here, where you can have, like, we're about to get an influx of freshmen. Some of you are freshmen right now, but you're practically sophomores, man, right? I'm not, forget all that stuff. Because like in a week or two, you're like, I'm done with that freshman stuff. But we're about to get an influx of freshmen in. And that upsets some of the other people that are here. Oh, those little kids, man, what are they doing here? I ain't got time for all that. I was never like that when I was that age. Yes, you were. And what can happen is it's like, I can't roll with all that. But we have a responsibility in that instance for the older to teach the younger. Biblically, that's how this thing works. Biblically, that's how it works. What we know, we pass on, the good stuff. What we know, we pass on to the younger. We warn them about the bad things. But we have a responsibility to do that. Moses is telling the parents here, the people, like, hey, you got to teach this to your children. Why? So that it's perpetual. It perpetuates. So that it continues on. If they decide, those little pesky kids, I'm not teaching them nothing, man. Then what happens is the relationship that they have, the uniqueness that they have with the relationship with God, it dies out with that generation. You may have heard it said before, but Christianity is only one generation away from extinction. If all of us just decided that, you know what, when we have kids, we're not teaching our kids nothing, man. Let them figure it out for themselves, right? It's hard out there in them streets. They let them just figure it out themselves. And we decide that we're just going to let them fend for themselves, Christianity dies. Now, obviously, we know that God's not going to allow that Christianity to die. But we all have the responsibility to take part in that cause, that we are teaching the younger ones. So then, with that viewpoint, with that mindset, when the doors open up and here come all of the brand new freshmen, squeaky clean, instead of, oh, man, and being repelled, what happens is my attitude changes to, oh, let me run toward you. Let me go at you. Let me go talk to you. Let me welcome you in. Imagine, we've got camp coming up in just a few weeks. Imagine what would happen if one of the older classmen said to you, hey, are you going to camp? And you go, you know what? I don't know. Like, I don't really know that many people. Psh, come on, man, sign up. We'll go together. Let's go hang out, man. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And if somebody older than you invited you and decided that they're going to show you the ropes, this is what we do. Come on, and they hang out. I mean, what kind of an impact that would have on you? That would be that would be life-changing. So imagine, I know, wild thought, but imagine you do that for somebody younger than you. Well, it's just, it's like, yeah, it'd be life-changing. I just don't want to change my life. I got my own thing going on, and, ain't nobody got time for all that. I don't have time for those little kids. But that is biblical. It's a biblical attitude. It's a biblical principle that the older teaches the younger. And Moses, look what he demonstrates it for us in verse 14. And the Lord commanded me. They're at Horeb. He's reminding them. And the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments. That means the law, the rules, the judgments, what's right, what's wrong, that you might observe them in the land which you cross over to possess. So you're going, and what's happening is, he says, we're at Horeb. Remember that. Remember we're at Horeb, and God is giving me the law so that I can give it to you, so that you, verse 10, can give it to your children. See how that works? God gives it to me, I give it to you, you give it to somebody younger than yourself. That's how it works. That's the pattern, that's the hope, that's one of the goals of being in here, is that you come and learn from an old man, you then take it and teach it to somebody younger than you. You share it with somebody else. Thus, our relationship with God perpetuates, it grows, it continues to spread. That's the pattern. Again, this is something that Paul taught in the New Testament. This is something that it was told to Titus. It was told to Timothy. John, Peter talked about it, that the older should teach the younger. This is a biblical pattern. Allow God to use you that way, upperclassmen. Even you freshmen that are in here, you're about to be an upperclassman in just a moment. This is when all the newbies come in. You're going to be like, oh, I've been here for a year already. Got some time under my belt. I'm a veteran. So show the younger. It's a general principle also even in the world, because you have older cousins, some of you. And you learn all sorts of things from those older cousins, right? Things that you don't tell your mom and dad. The older teaching the younger. The problem is that oftentimes it's the older teaching the younger all the bad things. And like, we're not, you sleep overtime, and we're not allowed to watch that movie at home. You're not at your home. It's my home. Come on, let's watch it. Come on, nobody's gonna find out. We're in the room. Nobody's even gonna know. My mom and dad are asleep. It's not a big deal. Come on, let me show you what's up. And oftentimes it's taught to us. Those things are taught to us that way. It's the wrong way to do it. But that's what happens, and we need to do that same thing for those that are younger, those that are part of us, but just a younger part of us. Now, we're done with that section, so we move on to the next section, and this section is as far as we'll get today, okay? And he tells them here, he's reminding them to forsake idolatry, the worship of idols. Now, verse 15 says this, take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Remember, he just told us a moment ago that there was fire. The mountain was burning with a fire all the way up into the sky. And God's voice came out of that fire, but they looked and they didn't see a form. They didn't see a person or an image or anything. It was just, they just saw fire and heard a voice. And in verses 16, 17, and 18, he tells them, you've got to forsake idolatry in the form of carved images, man-made things, handmade things. Verse 16, he says, lest you act corruptly. So forsake those things so that you do not act corruptly, and make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is in the water beneath the earth. So he says, look, you saw fire. You heard a voice. And you go, you know what? That was pretty awesome. And I want to worship God. I do. But I'm not really sure, how do I worship him? I don't see him. And I'm trying to teach my son. You told me to teach my kids. So I've got this little boy, and I'm telling him, my little boy, hey, we got to worship God. And then he's like, where? What are you talking about? And then it enters my mind. Well, you know what? I think what I'll do is, I saw God in a flame, so I'm going to make myself a little statue, and just kind of carve out, make it look like a flame, and just put that on the shelf, just so my kids, so they have something to go, oh yeah, identify, oh that's right, yeah, there's a flame, Dad made it with his own hands, pretty cool, and that reminds us of being at Horeb, and the Word of God, yes, that's right, God. And we use that to worship God. But what happens is that little idol, that little flame, that little handmade item that you got on Etsy, I'm just kidding. No, you can buy stuff from Etsy. There's nothing wrong with it. But you begin then, the worship begins to be directed toward that. Well, I'm directing it to God, but this just helps me to visualize. I'm a visual person, and I just got to see something. God says, no, don't do that. That's what he's telling them. Do not do that. Carved images, you made it with you made it with your hand, and now you're going to worship it? That doesn't make any sense. It's like you made it, so it obviously cannot be God, but you're going to worship it as God. And yet, that's what he's telling them. Now, somebody help me out. Okay? Why would Moses, now he's reminded them so many times about idolatry. Don't be an idolater. Don't be an idolater. Don't be an idolater. Does anybody know why? Anybody have any reason? Can anybody give us something to help us understand why Moses was so concerned with idolatry? Anybody know why Moses was so concerned with idolatry? Chris, what do you think?
Because when he came down with the Ten Commandments, Aaron made like an idol.
Okay, very good. And Aaron made the idol, and they immediately worshipped it, right? I mean, they're like, God who? We got an idol. And they began to worship it. So it's in their heart. So we're good. We're on the right track. So yes, he's seen it before. They've been guilty of idolatry. Now, does anybody know why they so quickly, easily turned toward that little golden calf that Aaron had made? Anybody know why?
Because they were in Egypt and Egypt did it.
Ah, yes. The Jews, the Hebrews, had been in Egypt for like 300 years in slavery. Them and the aliens made the pyramids. I'm just kidding. They were not aliens. But they were there, and what happened? The Egyptians were idolaters. Egyptians were idolaters. And so Moses is saying, listen, your past idolatry is deep-rooted there. Okay? It's deep-rooted, so you got to be careful not to go back to that. Why else might Moses be warning them about idolatry? Anybody else know why he might be warning them about idolatry? He's also warning them about idolatry. Now, both of those. He's seen it in the past. He's also warning them about idolatry because of where they're going. They're going into the land of Canaan. And in the land of Canaan, the people there worship all sorts of gods. One of the major ones of the day was Baal. Okay, they've already dealt with that a little bit. But that was a major one, but they worship all kinds of gods. Now Moses had previously warned them, listen, when you go into the promised land, you are going to remove all the people from that land. They were going into a land, and there were people there already. A lot of people don't like this. They go, well, there were, indigenous people in the land. And now God is uprooting them and moving in the Jews. That doesn't seem right to me. Why would God be doing that to the Canaanites? God is actually removing the Canaanites from that land because of idolatry. So he's saying those people messed up, going to move them out and move in the Jews. And he says when you get there, listen, you're going to chase all the people out. They're going to leave behind things. And he told them, do not keep anything. You need to destroy everything. Why? Well, because, you know what? Oh, man, we chased these people out, and we went into their house, and, look what we found, man. We found this cool little thing, and, we're not sure what it is, but, they had it up on their, in the center of their house or the corner of their house, and it was, had candles around it burning, and they had some coins and jewelry, and, they had all kinds of things there. And so we don't know what it is, but you know what? I'm going to take it to, just as a reminder, I'm going to take it to my house, and I'm going to set it in my house over here. Boom, there I go. And what happens, all of a sudden, I found one of their gods, maybe in the rubble, or it was in their house or whatever, and then I take it, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool, it's just some dumb little idol, not a big deal, and then I stick it on my shelf, And what God didn't want them to do was eventually begin to, little by little, begin to worship that idol. So he says, when you get there, just destroy everything. At my home, I like knives. And so most of the time, you'll see me with a knife. I've got a knife, a little pocket knife on me right now, Plus, I'm Mexican, so I'm supposed to have one, But I like knives. And at home, I've got a few older, cool little knives. I got a World War II knife that would that they back then the soldiers could affix to their to the front of their rifle. You might have seen that in some of the movies or pictures or whatever. And so sometimes like you go somewhere and you find something, you bring it back with you as just a memento, reminder. God didn't want them doing that because they might eventually begin to worship that idol, that carved image. Now notice what he goes on to tell them also in verse 19. He says, do not worship carved images. And then in verses 19 and 20, he tells them, do not worship creation. Watch out. Verse 19, and take heed lest you lift your eyes to heaven. You go, man, I'm not worshiping these dumb little idols. Please. Somebody made that with their hand. Somebody's grandpa made that with their hands. I'm not that simple. I don't do that. Oh, but look at the heaven. And when you see the sun in verse 19, the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people, an inheritance as you are this day. So God removed you to be his unique people. But did you see what he told them there? He says, listen, do not worship creation. I like that he uses the word in verse 19, feel, all the host of heaven, and feel driven to worship them and serve them. Now, again, why would God be so particular and to say, hey, do not worship creation. Don't worship the heaven, the stars, the sun, the moon. Don't worship any of those things. Why would he tell them that? Anybody know why? Anybody know why? What do you think?
Because like people would try to like find a way to worship something else, so he has to like specify like each individual thing. I was like, well, he didn't say that, so maybe I can.
Cassidy, isn't that funny? Because we still do that, right? Well, they told me not to watch this movie, but they didn't say not to watch part 2. You know, like, parents have to be like, shh, here's a 30-page contract, don't do all of these things, and you're just like, oh, come on, but they have to be so specific. Come on. I'm talking to a human being here. And, that's how my heart can still be sometimes, like, can I make a U-turn or not make a U-turn? I don't know, it doesn't say, so I'm doing it, If there's no sign, I'm doing it, and it's like, I don't know if it's right or not, And so we have to be told specific things. But he says to them here, listen, do not worship any of these things. These, in the previous verses, the carved images, when he said, in the likeness of male or female, in the likeness of any animal or any bird, anything that creeps on the ground, beetles, roaches, lizards, any fish that is in the water. Now he tells them, do not worship anything that's in the heavens, up in the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars. Do not worship any of those things. He had to be specific because those were things that had been worshipped in Egypt. You go back and read the account of Exodus. What were some of the plagues that showed up? Anybody remember darkness? Why was that? To let them know that their sun god and their moon god that they believed put the sun up every day and put the moon up every day, to show them that there is no sun god, there is no moon god, there's only one God, and he controls all of this, and so he turned it completely black. What else was there? Remember locusts? Flies? Remember all of the water turned to blood? Each of those plagues was an attack on one of the so-called Egyptian gods. They believed that they had that gods existed for all of those little things, even beetles and bugs and fish and all of those things. The Nile, all those different things. And so God was showing them there are no gods that are in control of all these things. There's only one God. And so he's reminding them, don't do those things. Don't do those things. Now this is listen, I know you see it just like I see it. Get on social media, and your favorite celeb is like, hey, what's up, family? It's Sagittarius season. It's Virgo season. It's this season, or I've seen celebrities like, hey, contact DM me today, and get your free reading. I'm gonna throw your cards, man, your tarot cards, and we're gonna make sure that all the stars are aligned, and we're gonna try to find you the best day, for you to leave your house and go do such and such. And they're basing their lives on where the planet's at, and where's the moon, and the gravitational pull, and are these stars aligned, and is everything in order for me, and is it all lined up, and then they'll tell you, well, listen, the universe, is in control of your life, wherever where you are is where you are. Where you are is where you were meant to be. And because of, these stars and all these alignments, listen, you got to be careful. You got to be careful that you're not getting caught up in that. And like, oh, my life is controlled by these alignments and, whatever. Be careful. Because it happens little by little. Little by little. It's like being at the lake, and you look over and you go, oh yeah, look, I want to get to the other side over there, and you get in a boat and kayak or whatever, and you start to set out, and it's like, yeah, just trying to get over there, and if you're just off 1 degree and you just keep going, you don't realize, by the time you're like, how come I'm not getting over there? It's like, because you're going in the wrong direction. You didn't even realize, you didn't know. You were just off 1 degree, but little by little. And so he wants them to understand, listen, don't be caught up in that. Now, let me say something before we leave this little section and finish up verses 21 through 24. Let me say this. I think that we as Christians, there is an attitude with a lot of Christians nowadays, that we don't care about the environment. Nature, come on. That's for the tree huggers, right? You heard your dad say, tree huggers. Right? See a bumper sticker on the back of somebody's car, tree huggers, and it's kind of like, we don't care, we're going to heaven, this earth is going to burn, who cares, throw my plastic bottle out the window, or, throw my cigarette in the ocean or whatever. Just kidding, I don't smoke, okay? But just, you say, who cares? But it seems to me that that attitude is not right. It seems to me that that creation is from God. Yes or no? Yeah. And if he gave us something in creation, it's beautiful. It's incredible. I love being outdoors. The beach or the mountains or the desert, whatever it is. But it seems to me that if he gifted us with that, then we ought to be concerned about it. It's not eternal. This world, the earth is not eternal. But it seems that while we're here enjoying it, we ought to do our best to, to care for it, take care of it. But we just got to be careful. Listen, you want to hug a tree, go ahead and hug a tree. Okay? I'm not hugging a tree. That tree is not going to know that I'm hugging it. Okay? But I would just caution you, don't get caught up in, oh my gosh, this earth, this is the only thing we have. No, we are going to heaven. This earth is going to burn. So the Bible tells us. I believe it. So we are going to leave this behind. There's going to be something much better waiting for us. So we ought not be consumed or make it our God or our idol. But to be concerned about it, I think is a good thing for Christians. Now, he says in verse 21, furthermore, the Lord was angry with me, Moses says, for your sakes, and swore that I would not cross over the Jordan, that's the river, the Jordan River, and that I would not enter the good land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not cross over the Jordan, but you shall cross over and possess that good land. So reminding them, I'm not going with you. You're going with Joshua. I got to stay here. And just remind him, this is why I'm telling you this. That's what he's doing. Verses 23 and 24. Let's finish it up. As far as forsake idolatry, he says, listen, no carved images. Do not worship creation. And do not forget that God is a consuming fire. Wonderful verse there, verse 24. But look at 23. Take heed to yourselves. He said that a couple times before already. Take heed. Watch yourself. Like, watch your back, Holmes. Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant, the agreement, the Lord your God, which he made with you. And make for yourselves a carved image in the form of anything which the Lord your God has forbidden you. And then he gives us the reason why we better not forget that. Because in verse 24, for the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Did you hear how Moses described him? Jealous. And we'll get to the jealousy part in just a minute, okay? But let's talk about this consuming fire part real quick before we close. Does anybody remember where Moses was when he first met God? Cassie?
The burning bush, right?
Yes, ma'am, at the burning bush. What was crazy about the burning bush? What was unique about that burning bush?
It was all in flames, but it was still alive.
Okay, so it was on fire, but it was not being consumed. And Moses is like, man, what is it? I got to go see what this is. And he had his father-in-law Jethro's flock with him. And he goes and he sees this burning bush. And as he gets close, all of a sudden a voice comes out of the fire. Remember that? The voice came out. Moshe, Moshe. Take off your chanclas, man. You're standing on the holy ground. And he took his sandals off, and God began to speak to him out of a fire that was not consuming the bush. Now he tells them, now that was at the beginning of his relationship with God. Not the beginning of his life, but the beginning of his relationship with God. Now he tells these people at the end of his earthly life, do not forget, don't get involved in idolatry, man, because God is a consuming fire. What does that mean? It means that God can be in a bush that does not consume the bush in the fire and not consume the bush. He can do that. But he also, you need to know that he can also be a fire that does consume, that does burn. And you and I, these people needed to be aware of it. You and I need to be aware of this also. Because if you and I begin to get caught up in other things instead of worshiping God, God will begin to consume the things that you have. There's a wonderful example of this in the book of Haggai. One of my favorite books, and it's only 2 chapters long. I love short reads. In the book of Haggai, Haggai's the prophet, and God is speaking to the people through Haggai. And he says this, he says, hey, listen, you've been making money, putting it in your purse or your bag, but there was a hole in the bottom and the money kept falling out. You kept looking, man, there's no money. Where'd the money go? Put more money in, money's gone. He says you were trying to stay warm and you kept buying clothes and putting clothes on, but you couldn't get warm. He says you were planting crops, but all of the crops were dying. You weren't getting any crops back. Why was that happening? God actually says, he actually says in the book of Haggai to the people, he says, why did this happen? He says, because I, speaking about himself, this is God speaking, he says, because I blew it all away. Like it was dust. Nothing. Why would God do that? In the book of Haggai, it is because the people had been consumed with building their houses. You go, what? We can't build houses? No, you can build a house. The problem was that the temple was a slab of stone. They never finished it. They made this slab of stone, and they said, we're going to build the temple right here. Woo! And then everybody went home and started working on their own homes and left it like that for years. And so as they began to work, and the harder they worked, and the more clothes that they put on to try and stay warm, and the more crops they planted, they're just working their fingers to the bone, and God the whole time is just blowing it all away. Why? He says, because you've forgotten me. Because the people had made their homes their idols. This is another biblical principle that we finish with today. When you and I get caught up and consumed and something becomes more important to us than our relationship with God, guess what? You're going to work and work and work, and you're going to be like a hamster on that wheel. Just like, man, I'm just going hard. Like, what's going on? I'm just trying to go hard, and nothing's working out, man. I'm not producing anything. Like, I'm just burning my energy. What's happening? Well, you may want to check and see if perhaps you are just stuck on that wheel because what? Because you've gotten your eyes off of the Lord, and now God is beginning to take things away. I've seen him do it. I've seen him begin to take things away. So what Jesus talked about in the parable of the talents. There was 3 servants, the one that had the fewest, he did not properly use his talents, money. So when the master got back, he said, man, what did you do with the money? The guy says, well, I just held on to it. I buried it, man. I didn't do anything with it because I wanted you to have your money back. And he says, you should have invested it and increased it. But because he didn't use it properly, you know what he did? He goes, give me those talents. And he took the talents from him, cast them away, and gave the talents to somebody else. So when you and I, we've been given talents. When you and I get our eyes off of God and we start doing our own thing and building up my own castle, man, my own house, we do that. We erect this life for ourselves. Like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to accomplish these things, and I'm going to go here and be famous, and I'm going to do all this stuff. And we start building this all up. You're going to find yourself oftentimes, it's like, man, nothing's working out. Why is that? It's because God loves you. And you're losing focus, and he's beginning to take things away so that you will turn toward him. That's what Moses means by the Lord your God is a consuming fire. He's telling the people, don't get caught up in idolatry, because if you do that, then God's going to start taking away all your stuff. He's going to start taking away all your stuff. He finishes by saying that God is a jealous God. What does that jealous God? Whoa, what? What does that mean? Blasphemy. How could God be jealous? Well, jealousy oftentimes gets mixed up with envy. Anybody know what jealousy is? Anybody give us a simple definition of jealousy? Anybody? What do you think, Cassie? Throw one out there.
It's basically like when you want something.
Yes?
Like if that someone else has, but like that's when you want something.
Uh-huh.
Envy is like when you wish that person doesn't have it and you have instead of them.
Okay. Envy is, I really like David's hat. And I wish I had it. And I also wish he didn't have it. It would look way better on me. That would be envy. Okay? Jealousy is when I'm afraid to lose something. When I'm afraid to lose something. So I have a relationship. Most often, jealousy, you see that in relationships. Somebody's got a special somebody, and they're jealous. They don't want to lose that. There's a fear of losing that. So when he says he's a jealous God, he's God. I know it sounds strange to us, but Moses is using human terms. Keep that in mind. He's trying to express to the people that if you start following idols, God is going to consume. He's going to take away stuff from you because he's afraid to lose you. Same thing for today, 2023, no different. God wants your worship. He's afraid to lose the intimacy that he has with you. And so if you start to go astray, he'll begin to take things away. Why? Because he's so mean. And why would he do that? No, because he wants your attention first. He wants a relationship with you because he loves you. Now, we're not going to get into it today, but I'll give you a quick little preview just so you know. He's going to talk to them next about their future disobedience. Look at this. Sin, scattering, seeking. This will be the pattern from then, Deuteronomy chapter 4, through 2023. No change. The people sin. As a result of that, God scatters them. As a result of that, they return to God by seeking God. And they do great for a while. And then guess what happens after the seeking? Anybody want to take a wild guess what happens after the seeking? Sin. And then God scatters them, and then they seek. Anybody want to take a wild guess what happens after seeking? Sin. Scattering, seeking. Sin, scattering, seeking. Sin, scattering, seeking. And it's been going on since then, and it hasn't ended yet. For the most part, the Jewish people today, for the most part, they are not saved. There are many of them that do not even worship God. They don't even believe in God. There are actually more non-religious Jews than there are religious Jews in the world. I met a man one time at last year's men's conference. He said he was Jewish. I said, oh, really? Well, that's incredible. And we talked a little bit and talked to him about going through Leviticus because we were going through Leviticus in here. And he's just looking at me like, what? I said, Leviticus, it's like in the Torah. I said, you said you were Jewish, right? He goes, I said I was Jew-ish. He didn't have a clue. He's like, I don't know what that is. Torah, what's Leviticus? He didn't have a clue. But he was Jew-ish. We've got to be careful that we're not getting caught up, in the things of this world and losing attention of, God, losing our focus on God. And then he's having to take things away in order to get us back. Now, he loves us and he'll do it. But it would be so much sweeter to just stay in fellowship with him. Keep it simple. Love the Lord first. Yeah, have the fashion and the cars and the nice things and the fame and the whatever. Oh, there's nothing wrong with those things. But let me keep God in the proper place. Father, thank you so much for this.